Perfect. So, good day, good afternoon, good night to everyone from all over the world. Thank you for joining Scott Ambler's presentation and the Access Agile Festival 2021 in October. Just as a reminder, this is part of the Access Agile Festival. We have 3 days with more than 150 presentations all around the world, completely free. So go to access-agile.org or to our meetups or any of our socials, the LinkedIn, Slack, Facebook, YouTube, Meetup, Twitter, or any Slapstagram the kids are doing these days for the full picture. Our vision, as always, is to create a worldwide, inclusive, free, and co-create a festival to learn, share, and nurture a better community of Agile for free. And this is a celebration of events to have a specific focus on cost without any cost. Just as a reminder, our code of conduct, we expect everyone to behave respectfully, and we will not tolerate any harassment in the festival in any form. If you see something, please say something in our code of conduct form in our website. And if we see anyone who's misbehaving, we hold the right to kick that person out. Without further ado, we leave you with Scott Ambler's presentation, Choose Your WoW. For those who don't know Scott, Scott is the Vice President, Chief Scientist of Disciplined Agile at the Project Management Institute. Scott leads the evolution of Disciplined Agile, also known as DA, toolkit, and is an international keynote speaker. Scott is the co-creator of Disciplined Agile toolkit, as well as the Agile Modeling and Agile Data methodologies. He is the co-author of several books, including Choose Your WoW, and Executive's Guide to Disciplined Agile Framework, Refactoring Databases, Agile Modeling, and the Primer 3rd edition. Scott blogs regularly at projectmanagement.org, and he can be contacted via PMI and pmi.org. And if I must say, you should follow him on Twitter as well, because he's fantastic. Scott, take it away.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen here. I hope you can see. Can you see my slide? I hope so. Okay, there we go. That's one of the problems with Zoom. You never quite know what's going on. Anyway, so thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to attend this talk. So what I want to do, you've heard about me. You don't need to hear more. What I want to do is I'm going to first, walk through a little bit of data around frameworks and how well things are actually working out there. And then I'm going to walk you through what do you actually want to do as a team and as an organization. I'm also, for those of you who know me, you know that it can be a bit provocative at times. I question this failing fast vision that we have within the Agile community. It certainly is better than failing slowly, and I'll talk about that, but it's really not that bright. So, but if it's the best you can do, it's the best you can do. But anyways, I'll show you significantly better. So anyways, and then I'll actually walk through most of the talk will be actually real examples and walking through how you can be better, how you can succeed early rather than fail fast. So let's get better. So the first thing I want to start with is our frameworks, and please don't get me wrong. I think the frameworks are very useful. I think there's a lot of great stuff there to be had, and there's great religious debates about various frameworks, and fine, good, but I think we need to give respect where it's due. The frameworks have some value, and they're great sources of information. They are great starting points in many cases, but they're not your ending point. And I want to be phenomenally clear about that. Adopting a framework is not the end point. Your transformation should not be, so if your organization is in the middle of a transformation, an agile transformation or some other transformation, the end point is not to adopt a framework. It might be a step along the way, but that's not it. And we'll talk about what your end point should really be. So anyway, so how effective are frameworks in practice? I think that's a fair question. And there's a lot of good marketing rhetoric out there, and case studies and all that good sort of stuff, and that's interesting. And but take it all with a grain of salt. I would not trust any sort of marketing claims from the people who are bringing you the things that they're trying to sell you. What I would do though, and what I do is I look for actual industry data being created by people that don't have an axe to grind and who are actually trying to help. So anyway, so let's talk about that. So what happens when you adopt a framework, so Scrum or Safe or Less or something else? And let's assume that you're successful at it. Let's give credit where credit's due. So there's an initial learning curve, and you become less effective for a while. You're getting training, you're getting coaching, you're figuring it out. So you become less effective, but fairly quickly things get better, and you become more effective than you were in the past. And remember, this is the positive. We're going to assume that things work out here. But sadly, you hit the limits of the framework. There's only so much. So even though the Scrum guide is wonderful, it's 13 pages of awesome, but it's 13 pages. It's reasonably limited, for those of us who can count. The wonderful literature around Safe or Less or many other things. Also, there's only so much there, and you hit the limits of the framework. So all the frameworks solve a certain problem, and once you solve that problem, well, it is what it is. Ivar Jakobsen, if you're familiar with him, he likes to call this, you end up in method prison or framework prison, because you're hitting the limits, and they really aren't, other than rhetoric, everything's the art of the possible, and you can do anything you want, you can tailor it. They don't give you any advice. So an interesting question is, well, how high up is this line? And the answer is it is positive. There are positive results. We're not seeing the 4 times productivity improvements we're getting promised. We're not doing twice the work in half the time on average, right? And there are some teams that benefit greatly from adopting these frameworks. I've been involved. I have seen teams that have improved their productivity by 10 times. It's not because they adopted a framework, it's because they stopped fooling around. Like I've been involved, I've been involved with teams. I've told this story a few times, so I apologize if you've heard it before. I've been involved in teams where we changed the coffee in we changed the quality of the coffee in the team kitchen, and we measurably improved productivity by 20%. So, you need to make the improvements that make sense. But anyways, having said all this, so why do I like this data? Well, first, this data is coming from Dr. Don Reifer. He earned his PhD from a respectable university, answering the question, how effective is Agile in practice? He is not associated with any of the frameworks. He's not associated with DA, not associated with Safe or Scrum or anything. He's a researcher, and he's gathering data from a large number of organizations and a large number of teams, and he's sharing his results with us. He's got a couple of good books out. So a lot of good stuff is coming out of Don, including some not so pleasant statistics. But having said all that, it's still positive. So let's just respect that. So if the frameworks aren't working out as well as we've been promised, who should we look to? Well, I would argue, why don't you be smart about this and ask yourself the question, who do you respect? What companies are you afraid of? Who are the apex level competitors in your environment? So, if I was to ask you, what are like really great companies that are really, really productive and really effective and really competitive? Right away, organizations like Apple and Amazon, Google, Tesla, I hope they're all coming to mind, eBay, and many others, right? Because they're very, very competitive. So are they special? How did the Amazons of the world get to be so effective? Do you honestly think it was by adopting frameworks and, by copying somebody else's approach, by being a follower? No, of course not. So what do? They all follow a technique called continuous improvement, and there's various names for this. Gemba Kaizen is one of my more favorite ones. But anyways, they take a continuous improvement approach. So they run into an issue. They identify some sort of a problem, and they identify several potential ways of addressing that problem. Now, in the case of the Amazons of the world, they're often dealing with problems that nobody else has solved before. So they've really got to think things through, and they get into experimentation. They really truly get into experimentation mode. Other organizations who are followers, they could probably leverage the ideas of others. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So anyways, you've got an issue, you identify potential ways of potentially addressing it. So then you try them out. You also, if you're smart, you also identify, how you're going to measure to, determine, whether or not this experiment is successful. So you experiment with this new technique or collection of techniques, as the case may be, because it's a good idea sometimes to run multiple experiments in parallel to speed things up. And you give them a fair shake, and then you assess. You measure. How effective was this? Did it work? Did it not work? So if it worked, you adopt the strategy or the portions of the strategy that worked, and you abandon what doesn't work. And then, of course, if you're nice, you share your learnings with others, and then you rinse and repeat, and you go back to, let's focus on the next problem, right? So this is the way the Amazons of the world got as good as they are. They've been continually improving. They've been doing it for so long now, they're way ahead of everybody else. This is why it's so scary to have to compete against them. So some of you, are probably thinking, well, wait a minute, isn't this like PDCA? Yeah, sure. This chart is just a slightly more detailed version of PDCA or PDSA. And for those of you who are process wonks like me, a little interesting tidbit of information call it information, is that even though most people like to talk about plan, do, check, act, or advise, or whatever, it's interesting. Originally, Deming came up with plan, do, study, act. And then he ran an experiment, and he said, well, wait a minute, maybe we don't need to study the results of this. Maybe we can just sort of check and eyeball what happened. So he reworked this method to plan, do, check, act. And then ran that experiment for a few years, actually, and realized right at the end of his career, he realized that plan, do, study, act was actually the way to go. And so he backed out of plan, do, check, act in favor of plan, do, study, act being more effective. So anyways, either way, same basic stuff. So weird trivia for you. So what happens? So the organizations that are doing this, enjoy a continually improving curve. And to be fair, it's not perfectly smooth like this. It's really, jaggedy, right? Because you have some failures, you have some successes, but over time, because you adopt the successes and abandon the failures, you just continually improve. So this is why Amazon is way ahead of everybody else. So the failing fast fail. I think as an industry, we're not quite there yet to recognize that failing fast is actually a fail. But anyways, look at this gentleman here. He's on his Sea-Doo or whatever this thing is called now, jet ski. And I'm sure he's having a lot of fun failing. Of course, a second from now, when his jet ski is broken and maybe he's broken and has to go to the hospital, not so fun. But up until this probably point, he's having a blast failing fast. So fair enough, right? It is fun failing if you do it right. But maybe we can do better. So let's look at the continuous improvement strategy again. Let's look what actually happens. So, we run an experiment and we fail. Yeah, we fail fast. Excellent. And like I said earlier, failing fast is way better than failing slowly. So, I'll give the failing fast crowd that, that's without a doubt, that's true. But then, so we try again and we fail again. So we try again and we fail again and we try again. Oh, wait a minute. Now we got it. So we succeed this time. So we adopt what works. We share our successes, and then we move on to the next problem. So this is the challenge with failing fast. And yes, you can spin it. There's, we're learning along the way and all that good sort of stuff, but it's still a bunch of failures. Maybe we can do better. So let's rethink things. Notice how it's the same process for the most part. So the first problem is that some experiments fail. And as I said, there's wonderful rhetoric. It's not really a failure. It's, we've actually learned something, yay us. We didn't, at least it was a cheap failure because we failed fast and not slowly. Okay, yeah, I'll give you all that. Good for you. But failing fast is fine as long as you're not paying the bills. Let's start looking at the bigger picture here. So maybe we can improve this. Maybe we can start to succeed earlier, fewer failures. So if we can get better at that second step, identifying potential techniques, then maybe this process will be a little more successful. So how do you do that? Well, if you can hire an experienced coach, this is, I would argue, the value prop of coaching is that if you can have somebody that's been there, done that, who understands, who recognizes, the problem that you're currently facing, then yeah, they can give you better guidance. They can, point you in the right direction, and you can make better decisions when you identify potential new strategies to experiment with, and then make a better choice, right? You can choose something that's successful. Now, and I'm a firm believer in coaches. I'm going to talk about coaching a lot. But there's a few challenges to coaching. Can you hire a good coach? Do you even know how to hire a good coach? Because there's a lot of people claiming to be coaches. Not as many of them are, and then, there's a lot of coaches, and then there's some good coaches, right? Well, I'll just leave it alone at that one. But anyways, can you identify, can you attract these people? Can you retain them? Are these coaches with experience in an area that you're currently, with the problems that you're currently facing? Because even though you are unique, you're a unique person, your team is unique, your organization is unique, and without a doubt, more than likely you face challenges that are very similar to what have been faced by other people before you and solved by those people, right? So if you can somehow leverage their learnings, you can make better choices when you identify experiments and fail less often, because you can choose something that is actually likely to work for you. So another approach, which completely supports coaching and non-coaching as well, I guess you could say, is if you had access to some sort of a process knowledge base that puts techniques into context, that shows you your options, you could make better choices. And this is what the DA toolkit is all about. And the technique that we recommend is called guided continuous improvement. So by improving on that second step, by applying the toolkit, I'm going to show you, I'm going to work through several examples of how to do that, you can fail less often, which means you succeed more often and you improve faster and cheaper. So that should be interesting to you. So an interesting question to ask is, what do you actually need to improve? Well, obviously, you want to improve at the team level. That's, I hope obvious. And at the individual level as well, of course. Don't get me wrong on that one. But we also need to improve across teams, because one of the interesting myths or misunderstandings, might be a better way to say it, within the Agile community, is that teams are whole. And that is a wonderful thing. That's a great philosophy. I'm a firm believer of it. But I can also choose to observe that it doesn't really work. It's not happening is what's going on, because the reality is my team needs to collaborate with other teams. So for example, if I want funding for doing something, I need to work with the finance team. If I need, I'm being governed, so I'm working with the governance team. If I want some advice, I might, some technical advice, I might go work their enterprise architecture team or the security team or somebody else, right? So my team is going to interact with other teams and sometimes collaborate with them. And the challenge here, and this is something to keep in mind, I'll make it a little more obvious here. Different teams in the organization do different things. There's software development teams, and they're off doing software development. There's the finance team, counting beans. There's the legal team. There's the vendor management team, the procurement team. There's the marketing folks. There's the architecture folks, the data folks, security folks, operations folks, many, many others. They all have different priorities. They all come from different backgrounds. They all have different mindsets. They all have different ways of looking at the universe. They may be focused on different outcomes, and yet you all need to play ball together. So in that sort of a world, what tends to happen? Well, a lot of organizations are struggling with Agile, outside of IT. We've got a lot of, we've solved the software development problem. I'm happy to argue that one. We've solved the software development problem. We have a really good handle on how to coach software development teams. Great techniques. It's all there. Now, your organization might still be struggling with all that, but other organizations have figured it out and are sharing their techniques. But the problem is we hit this glass, at that point, we tend to hit a glass barrier. And a lot of organizations are in this situation now where the software teams are doing Agile, but these other teams outside of Agile, or at least a large portion of them, aren't improving. They aren't listening to this. The Agile coaches go to work with the finance folks, and the finance folks don't have anything to do with them, or they give them a very hard time. And because a lot of coaches don't know how to talk to the finance folks, or the data folks, or the architecture folks, and so on. Going up a bit, we have an even bigger problem. We have organizational antibodies we might have a success with the finance team for whatever reason, but all these other teams in the organization, there's going to be a portion of them that just want to have nothing to do with the Agile stuff. And that's a hard nut to crack. And so this is one of the reasons why, I don't know how well known this is, but the Agile transformation industry right now enjoys a 70% failure rate. So we've got a few issues there. So what do you do? Well, I would argue you want to have team coaches to help at the team level. So a good team coach will, help train you, might be involved in training, but you really want to train and enable your teams to improve continually. And this is, team coaching supports this, training supports this, processes support this, and so on. But certainly a team coach can provide good guidance and, shepherd you along. At the next level, we need senior coaches. Okay. And this is a big difference. We need experienced, seasoned, knowledgeable coaches that know how to negotiate improvement experiments across disparate teams. So if my team is having an issue with the way that we're working with the finance team, as a coach, I need to come up with a way that both teams can agree. Here's how we're going to work. Here's a new strategy for us to experiment with to see if we can make this work in our situation. And if both sides of that fence don't agree to that, it's not going to happen. And so that's a bit of a coaching skill. And then finally, enterprise coaching, or transformation consultants, or whatever you want to call that role, they need to be able to negotiate experiments across across value streams, across many teams, which have very different priorities and very different backgrounds, and that's hard. In all of this, we should be aiming towards: can we become a learning organization? Can we be like the Amazons and the Googles of the world that continually improve, that aren't just adopting frameworks, right? We want to get on that curve. We want to get on a better curve, actually. Talk about that later. So let's work through some examples. So how do you improve the team level? This is fairly easy. I'm gonna go through this quickly. So we've got an existing team, and we've got an existing product, and this isn't a software team. This is a toy. We've got a toy in the marketplace, and our existing customers love it, but we got a problem here that our customer base isn't growing. We're doing good. Don't get me wrong, we're doing good, but we're not growing. We keep adopting new features into this toy, but new really cool things, different colors, whatever it is you do to improve toys, but we're not growing our market base. So even though our product owner really understands our existing customers well, they don't really understand what non-customers want. We really don't have a handle on how we can grow this, because we just don't know what features to add to the team. So we got a problem. So what do we do? Well, if we happen to be, an Agile requirements expert, then it's pretty obvious, right? But let's assume we're not a requirements expert. So we go to the toolkit, and first of all we go to the very high level of, well, what are some of the things that teams need to do? Well, it seems that we got a problem in the way we explore scope. We don't really have a handle on the requirements, on what people actually want, or at least these new people actually want. And if I'm a process expert, this might be enough info. Oh yeah, we got to fix our requirement strategy. Okay, but let's say I don't have deep experience in it. So let's go down to the next level of detail. So we go to the explore scope diagram, and this is basically a mind map. It actually used to be mind maps, but this is an extension to mind mapping, where the way you read this is that, so we have this process goal to explore scope, to get a handle on what people want. We have a bunch of decision points. So one of the things that's very different about Disciplined Agile compared to the prescriptive frameworks is that we don't tell you what to do. We don't have just one set of practices or one way of doing things. We instead walk you through, here are the issues you need to think about. Here are the decisions that you probably need to make. So when it comes to exploring scope, you probably should understand the purpose of what you're doing. You should probably understand, how are people going to use this thing that you're working on? Do you understand the domain? Do you understand the process of using this product? Do you understand how people are going to play with this toy in this case? Are there any general requirements or any quality requirements? So, do we have security requirements? Do we have, we might have some safety requirements, given that it's a toy. So there's a bunch of decisions that we need to make as to how we're going to work when it comes to exploring scope. Now, this is pretty much this is a good checklist, actually. So if it happens to be that you have reasonable requirements exploration experience, this might not be enough of a checklist. Like, oh, wow, yeah, I remember this technique. Yeah, let's try this. But sadly, we don't have that on the team. So we go down the next level of detail. So we've got a pretty good understanding that we need to get better at exploring the usage. If we understand our users better, or customers better, and what they potentially want, we could probably build toys that we can probably add features or take features away, perhaps, that would actually be attractive to them. But sadly, and once again, sadly, we don't have deep experience in all this. We've had some Agile training, and we know about user stories and epics, and maybe user story maps, but it just isn't getting the job done. So we go to the toolkit now. This is online at pmi.org, free of charge. You can also drop $20 on the Choose Your WoW book if you want. $20 plus shipping if you get the physical one, or just $20 if you get the the digital version of it. But anyways, or you can get it free of charge at pmi.org. So you dive down to the toolkit, and we start reading do a little bit of reading now. So the way that these techniques are described is, as you can see, we give a brief overview of, here's the technique, enough to get a handle on it. We also put it in context. We describe the trade-offs. Now, you can't see it here, but we also have a feature where you can actually, you might be able to see it in the top corner. Let me move this thing. Yeah. So if you were to click on additional resources, you would get to a bunch of references. So if I was to click on persona, for example, it's just, I'm not showing this. So anyways, but the idea here is that we have this overview of techniques. We look at them, go, oh, you know what, this persona thing, if we were to create personas, that would give us a better understanding of potential customers. That sounds like it's going to work for us. That's a technique that we should experiment with, because more than likely it seems as if it's going to work. Now, you can still fail. You're only human, right? But you can narrow down, you can home in on something that's probably going to work. Increase your chance of success. Now, if we're in the actual tool and not a slide deck, we'd be able to click on additional resources for personas, and go to a blog perhaps on personas, or I think a book, or maybe or some sort of a video, right? So because there still might not be enough information here to get you going. So the idea here is, what our goal is in DA is to put these potential techniques into context for you, make you aware that you've got options, put those options into context, so that way you can make better decisions, and then point you to the details that are developed by the experts, because there's some very good references and assets around personas developed by other people. So we point you in that direction. So that's the idea at the team level. Now, what about improving across teams? Now, this is, how do we get past this glass barrier of Agile adoption? So earlier I was talking about how, my team's got to work with the finance team. So let's work through this scenario. So the finance team comes to us and they say, yeah, your funding's about to run out. And, so if you want more funding, you got to put together a business case, and you're going to need estimates and, yada, 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 lots of bureaucracy, or no funding. And so this is a serious challenge, right? They control the funding. And a lot of, and this is a classic problem in a lot of organizations. The Agile teams want to work in an Agile manner, yet the money people, the finance people, are still working in a traditional annual budgeting, big budgets, all that good sort of stuff, upfront type of a mindset. And it doesn't work out well. It puts the teams at risk. So the team says, well, wait a minute, woe is me. It's a lot of useless bureaucracy. What's your problem? Basically. The finance team comes back, well, you know what? This is the way we work. You don't like it. You don't get funding. You got a problem. Better start looking for employment. Because we do, we don't do time materials here. So, you Agile coaches keep saying, oh, time materials, we're Agile. But you know what? We don't do time materials here. It's, we failed at that before. It's too risky for us. So therefore, we've got to do this big upfront budgeting stuff. Well, that's a problem. Most teams are out of luck at this point. But let's say you've got a more seasoned coach. So what do? Well, we realized, hey, one of those process goals, remember that big diagram before, was to secure funding. How do we fund a team? Sadly, the existing techniques that we're following are this fixed cost, fixed price ranged approach with a reasonably formal request process. You got to jump through some hoops, go to the PMO. One thing I didn't point out on the previous diagrams, and I apologize for this, are these arrows. So in this case, all three of these have arrows. We'll see some without. We actually have seen some without. But what the arrow represents or indicates is that these are ordered lists. So the strategies towards the top of the list are generally more effective than the strategies towards the bottom of the list. So right now, our finance team is insisting on some reasonably ineffective ways of working. But to be fair to them, they believe in these things. It works for them. They honestly believe in this. They're not evil. They're not purposely jerking you around. They actually honestly believe in this. Fair enough. But as we can see, there's an opportunity for improvement here if we could negotiate coherently. So what do? And sadly, once again, on our team, we don't have any finance experts. And that's probably a lot of the problem of why we haven't been able to budge on this problem yet, is because the Agile folks have no ability to talk coherently with the finance folks. So anyways, so we go to the toolkit and we see, here's this fixed price range, the current approach that we're working on. And there's a lot of challenges with it, which we're experiencing. But there's also some benefits, right? There's no such thing as a worst practice, just like there's no such thing as a best practice. All practices and strategies are contextual in nature. They work well in some situations and they're bad ideas in others. So here we see that, I'm sure the finance team is focused on the good stuff and may or may not be aware of some of the bad stuff that's happening. Fair enough. But now at least we can start having a coherent conversation. So we go back and we look at the diagram, we see, wow, there's 4 better techniques for our funding strategy. Maybe, just maybe, we could experiment with one of them, even though they're currently bitter about time materials. And this is the challenge, right? So if we only know about time materials funding for Agile, then chances are pretty good it's going to fail again. So yeah, you might fail fast, but you're still going to fail. Let's be smarter about this. Really, let's be smarter about this. So we go to the toolkit, and we say, wow, look at that. There's trade-offs to time materials. It's also not perfect. No technique is. But there's another technique, stage gate, and it's sort of in between fixed price and time materials. So even though time materials is probably a better way, it is a better way of working. I just call it like it is. We're just not capable in our organization at the present moment to do that. But you know what? Maybe stage gate, which is a reasonably well-known technique for the finance folks, for most at least, is viable. So now let's have a conversation. Let's negotiate a viable technique to experiment with between those two teams, because my Agile team, my Agile delivery team, we have our mindset, we have our priorities. The finance team has their mindset, their priorities. Can we meet in the middle? Can we learn together? This is the idea. So let's experiment with stage gate. This strategy, even though it might not be our end game, has a much better chance of succeeding. And once we succeed here, suddenly we've built trust up with the finance department. So 6 months from now, when our funding runs out again, maybe we could have, maybe we can convince them to experiment with time material and move them up the food chain. Let's work through one more example, and we'll go to questions. So how do we improve across the organization? This is the, how do we solve this challenge? So this diagram here on the side, and I appreciate it might be difficult to see because of the, but anyways, this is the DA Flex value stream lifecycle. So a value stream begins, ends, and hopefully continues with the customer's in mind. So how do we bring products and services, offerings to market, to our customers? And in case of a government agency, the customers would be the citizens that you serve. So how do we do that? So that's what the DA Flex value stream is all about. And I'll talk about value streams in a bit. But anyways, so now we got a challenge here. Let's walk through this improvement scenario. So the PMO, the portfolio management folks, they say, hey, we need to release new offerings in the market faster. We gotta, our customers are complaining. We gotta do better. Let's start releasing new stuff faster, make more money, whatever the goal is here. And the product management folks says, yeah, that would be awesome. We'd love to do that. And we can do that by releasing minimum business increments rather than big releases. So let's chunk things up and release small things over time and, reduce the risk, get to market faster, all that good sort of stuff, get feedback, all these good things. And then of course the product management or the portfolio management folks say, well, yeah, but we fund projects, not new features. So you gotta challenge there, right? So just these two groups are misaligned. There's a misalignment between these two groups or two teams or whatever you want to look at that. Then the release management folks kick in and they say, yeah, we'd love to do, we love this product management idea, releasing smaller things into production, into the marketplace faster and more often, because smaller releases are less risky for us. We would love to do that. But sadly, it takes 3 months to get a database change. The data management folks, then they say, yeah, but you know what? Data is different. We need to think through everything up front. We got to do logical data modeling and physical data modeling and impact analysis and blah, 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 metadata management, master data management, and all these good sorts of things. Agile just doesn't apply to us. We're special. And then, of course, the portfolio management folks kick in at this point and says, yeah, but you know what? We need to release new offerings to market faster. So here we are in the typical corporate finger pointing, can't get anything done, loop. So how do you address that? Well, this is what enterprise coaches or value stream consultants, depending on your terminology, and both of those are very valid and slightly different things, should do. So the challenge here is now we need the skills to negotiate and to several different things across several disparate teams. In this case, there's only 4. And we all know, if I go back to this slide, these aren't the only 4 areas in your organization that are going to get affected by any sorts of change. We know the delivery teams are going to get affected, the business ops people are going to get affected, and so on, right? So there's many aspects of this idea of we want to release things to market faster. It's going to affect a large part of this value stream. But I'm just going to focus on these 4 areas because that's hard enough. But we know it's harder. So anyways, yeah, we've got to negotiate before these across these 4 different groups of people who once again have different ways of looking at the universe, different priorities, might be focused on different outcomes, and yet we still all need to work together to bring new offerings and to bring updated offerings to our customers, to bring real value to them. So that's a challenge, right? And this is the problem we need to be able to solve. And that's what an enterprise coach or a value stream consultant is skilled to do. And that takes experience, it takes knowledge. So at an organization level, at an enterprise, everybody's talking about enterprise or business agility these days, and good for them. So Agile is about far more than just software development. Yeah, I've been showing these hexes in various slides over time here. These are something we call process blades or process areas. You'll notice that there's 24 of them, if you can count very quickly. There may be more at some point in the future. Disciplined Agile delivery, which is all about solution delivery, what software teams should really be doing, is one of 24, right? So, and yes, and there's some DevOpsy stuff, so that's arguably techie as well. So, but it's not all about techie stuff, right? There's marketing, there's sales, there's people management, HR, there's vendor management or procurement, whatever you want to call that, legal, finance, many different other things. The entire organization needs to be working together effectively. The entire organization should be striving to improve continuously. And, and it's not going to be a single improvement program. You might kick off your overall transformation effort with some sort of adopt a framework type of a project. Fair enough. But you'll very quickly discover that it's not a project. It's really a journey, a never-ending improvement journey. This is what the apex, the apex level competitors are doing. The Amazons, the Googles, the Apples of the world. This is how they work. They improve across the organization continually. They've built a culture. They enable their teams. They enable their people to work together. They motivate them to work together to improve across within teams, individually, and of course across teams, across value streams, across the entire organization. This is what we want to do. We want to become learning organizations. This is the end goal for us. We want to become like Amazon, like Spotify, like Tesla. So how do we do that? Just to wrap up here, or almost wrapping up, it's not just about continuous improvement. We also need to get started as a team. So say I'm initiating a team today, right? We're starting to build a team. We want to get started on the right foot. Now, part of that is to choose your right life cycle, choose the right approach. So for example, in DA, we support multiple life cycles. We support an agile project-based life cycle that's based on Scrum. We also have a continuous delivery product, DevOpsy agile life cycle, also based on Scrum. We support a lean Kanban-based project life cycle. We support a continuous delivery, DevOpsy, Kanban-based lean life cycle. Some of these life cycles are project life cycles because projects still occur, and rightfully so. Sometimes you want to have project teams. Sometimes you want to have product long-standing teams. Sometimes you want to have exploratory efforts where we're creating MVPs, exploring new ideas in the marketplace, working on more of a very hypothesis-driven type of an approach. And sometimes we have large programs, teams of teams. This is what some of the scaling, that's the problem that some of the scaling frameworks, particularly less, like to solve, and arguably Scrum at scale. All good stuff, right? So different teams in different situations will choose different ways of working. This is something that you could choose to observe in your organization. And of course, there's serial stuff. There's traditional teams as well within your organization. This is not a complete list of potential life cycles, of course, but it's more than what's usually supported by the prescriptive frameworks. So you want to have the right thing. So one of the, take the right approach for your team, and also be prepared to, evolve and transition away from them when you get. So one of the big challenges, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but one of the challenges that many organizations struggle with is, or at least, senior leadership tends to struggle with is, well, wait a minute, Scott, you evil bastard, You're telling me that all my teams are going to work differently because they're unique. You're telling me that all my teams are going to be, improving constantly and getting better and changing the way that they work. How can I possibly govern them? This is no good. I need to enforce a common way of working across all my teams. I need to enforce this. No, you don't, actually. You can still have a consistent governance approach, which is based on, there are many different governance strategies, of course. But one aspect of it is to have lightweight, risk-based milestones that provide consistent visibility across teams, even though they're working differently. This is not documentation based, right? So this proven architecture milestone, which is just one of them, is addressing question, can you actually build this? If that's an appropriate question to be asking at this time, then yes, I need to be able to show that. And that doesn't mean I'm going to fill out a detailed architecture documentation template. It might, that's one way of doing it, but there's other options to address that and to show that the architecture actually works. So the idea here is my team will address that milestone in the most appropriate manner possible. Your team, for most appropriate manner for us, your team will also address that milestone when appropriate, as appropriate as well. So that is what gives executives the ability to govern it consistently across teams. So it's possible. And this is absolutely critical. If you don't have a coherent answer for governance, your agile transformation is pretty much guaranteed to fail. So anyways, we have some nice solutions for that. So how do you learn more? How you can get started in this? So just sort of wrap up here, we started by talking about adopting frameworks, and it's a great starting point. Do not get me wrong about that. It's a great starting point. It's often where people start, but it's not the end game. It's not the end game. That's the big mistake that people make. The apex predators or the apex competitors, either way, they take a continuous improvement approach. And this is classic Agile, classic Lean actually, which is great. But you can do better with guided continuous improvement. And that's what Disciplined Agile is all about. So our philosophy is to start where you are. You don't need to throw out everything that you're doing today. So if you're currently a safe shop, great. We can show you how to improve on safe. Currently a Scrum shop, great. We can help you to improve on Scrum. You're currently a traditional shop and you're still sort of struggling with Agile, great. We can show you to improve. So you start where you are, do the best that you can in the situation you face. And you're professionals, I know you're doing that already, but always strive to get better. And that's what we teach. So the goal of PMI is to help you to work smarter. And we are a nonprofit organization. We really are here to enable. It's a really nice and coherent thing. I get measured on enablements. I don't get measured on money. I get measured on how many people am I helping. That's very, very interesting. And everybody likes to beat us up a bit, but I would ask you, I would propose that we're not your grandfather's PMI anymore. There's some very interesting things going on here. So we really are about helping you to work smarter and become change makers and drive the change that you want to see, both in your teams, in your organizations, in your life. So successful organizations, the true Agile enterprises, the true Agile businesses take responsibility for evolving their own agility. They might start with a framework, but that's not the end goal. So it's interesting. People like to talk about the Spotify method. A lot of organizations adopted the Spotify method, and that might be a start. But the real Spotify method is to do continuous improvement. What I was talking about earlier is not to, we have tribes and squads and all these cool things. Yeah, that's what they were doing 10 years ago. Good for them, right? But the real process is to do continuous improvement, to be a learning organization. So I'm going to leave you here with a call to action before I take questions. So there's ways you can learn more about Disciplined Agile. That's the URL for the Disciplined Agile Hub, lots of information there. We have a Disciplined Agile Scrum Master certification, and that is poorly named, and I appreciate that, but and we're going to fix that problem. And that gets you started on DA. It gives you gives you the skills to understand the toolkit and to start improving it at the individual level, and to be involved at the team level. The Disciplined Agile Senior Scrum Master, and this is probably also misnamed, but that's all about how do we lead improvement at the team level and sometimes the teams level, at the program, so similar teams. How do we do that? And this is for enterprise class Agile. We're looking at the whole picture, not just Scrum. So it really is misnamed. But the next cert up is the Disciplined Agile Coach. So how do we lead improvement across disparate teams? My team and the finance team, or my team and the data team, and so on, right? And that's a skill. And if you don't it really is. So we teach how you can do that. We teach you how to dive into the toolkit and learn more about the mindset of the finance people. Because it is different, right? So there's a shared mindset in Disciplined Agile, but we also extend the mindset for each of these process blades, because the finance people look at the world differently than the data people, who look at it differently again than the marketing people and the development people, and so on and so on and so on. And yet you still need to work together. And if you don't appreciate and respect the mindset of the other people across the table from you, it's going to be really hard for you to work together with them, to do so effectively, and particularly hard to improve. And this is why we hit this glass barrier, is because we don't appreciate this. We got to move away from the prescriptive stuff. And then finally, the Disciplined Agile value stream consultant. So how do you become an enterprise coach or a value stream consultant? How do you lead improvement across many teams in order to be truly effective at bringing offerings to your customers? So thank you very much. I'm easy to contact. I believe we have a few minutes for questions, and I'm always happy, to answer emails and stuff like that. But anyways, let's go to a few questions.
Thank you very much, Scott. So thank you everyone for joining. We only have a couple more minutes for questions, because we have a hard stop for the next talks. But there's a question here in the chat, and if you want to say your question, please raise your hand, and if we have time, we will come to your questions. So Jose Luis asked in the chat, is it reasonable to apply or try to Agile in an organization who are not willing or are almost unable to undergo important transformations, example, government and public organizations?
Well, people have to want to improve. So government, so don't look for excuses. Oh, well, I work for the government, therefore I can't be Agile. I'm going to call complete and utter BS on that. That's an excuse. Don't go for it. Just don't. I was recently involved in a study with the US federal government, and there's some pretty cool and amazing things going on there at the US federal government level, let alone anywhere else in the world. So it is definitely possible. But having said that, people do need to want to improve. They do need to, to use a 90s word, be empowered to improve and believe that they can. And you need a psychologically safe environment. That's actually one of the, I didn't go into the DA mindset at all, but that's one of the, one of the promises of DA is to have a psychologically safe environment. Because otherwise people aren't going to improve. They aren't going to be allowed, they won't, they're not safe. So they perceive they're not safe. So they're not going to want to improve because it's too risky. So fair enough. So you need to set up an environment where this can happen. And yeah, it can be tough in government agencies. A lot of government workers perceive that they're unempowered or disempowered, and often they actually are, but you can improve. And by the way, if you do work for the US federal government, one of the president, I believe, I don't know for sure if it's hit the, I won't go there. But anyways, there is a directive to become more agile. And I can't quite remember how high up the food chain it went. But I was involved with that. But it's pretty freaking high up. So anyways, take it seriously. There is a clear directive in the US federal government to become more agile. I can safely say that, hunt that down, and other governments too, right? So I appreciate this is international. And I'm from Canada, so, but anyways.
Thank you very much. We only have I hopefully for the two questions that are here. Arturo, please go ahead.
Hey, Scott, nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I have an hypothesis. I want you to kind of see if that is the way. I think that Disciplined Agile, in the way it is structured, it is kind of like a common sense tool, right? Like, hey, these are the problems that happen, and maybe these are the things that us, the creators, think could be solved. And sometimes you can have even this arrow, right? Like, hey, we recommend this. I was seeing a comment in the chat that say, no, but the stage gate is worse, etc. At the end, I think that is irrelevant, right? That if we agree that those are problems and these are solutions, is it something that we can also interpret and maybe don't agree with you, but at least have these options available to try to solve problems with these guided experiments? Is that kind of the way of.
Exactly. So it was a subtle nuance, but I used the term, when I describe the arrows, the ordered lists, I use the term generally more effective. The ones that are generally more effective towards the top of the list. So when two things are like side by side in a list, you might be in a situation where that would actually be reversed. So, so in most cases, stage gate is a better way of funding than fixed price in most situations, but not always, right? So it's generally better. So, your mileage may vary is the American slang on that one. But what you really want to do is have a coherent conversation, right? Now, you've got choices, and we're also not saying that those are the only choices, but it's certainly far more than you probably know about. And there's enough information that you can have a coherent discussion now. You can break out of the Agile rhetoric. And because one of the challenges with Agile is we have this weird terminology, right? Like, so the Scrum terminology is fun, but it's also put like total blinders on people. So you can't, I've seen like very senior Scrum practitioners who have no ability to search for non-Scrum stuff. And they have problems. They're suffering from problems right now that they can't solve. They perceive they can't solve because they can't find it within the Scrum community. And then, like, I've literally taught workshops where I've had people like, very experienced Scrum people, and they're just like, I'm being forced to take this workshop, and I'm a senior Scrum master, and I know everything there is to know about everything because I'm awesome. I'm a master. Okay, yeah, thanks, attitude boy. And at the end of the workshop, at the end of the first day, they come up to me and always, and the story is, oh my God, we've been suffering. We've got, you showed me how to solve several problems that we've been suffering from for a long time. And not only did you tell me how to solve them, you gave me multiple options. Who knew, right? Where have you guys been? Well, yeah, you'd have to get out of the Scrum box, wouldn't you? So anyways, and I don't know, Scrum is great. Don't get me wrong, but it's limited, right? All these frameworks are limited, and they solve a certain problem. And once your problem goes out of their little bailiwick, you're in serious trouble. But anyways, let's take one more question, I hope.
I don't think that we have time because we're going to use for the next session of the festival, but I'll make sure to send you the questions that are here in the chat. So
yes,
you
please.
can,
thank you.
So you can maybe write an article around that or tweet around that. And just before we finish, I would like to thank you, Scott, for your presentation. Thank you everyone for joining. And just to remind everyone that this is part of the Access Agile Festival. We have more than 150 events still going, 50 just today. And they are all for free. So I would encourage you to join and to see everything that is all around Disciplined Agile, because it's absolutely fantastic. Again, thank you, Scott. And you will find this recording in our archive as soon as possible.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate being invited.
We appreciate having you.
Thank you.
Thank you a lot.